I'm District Attorney General Amy Weirich. I am releasing today to the public the complete Tennessee Bureau of Investigation file into the shooting death of Brian Cooper at the hands of 3 on-duty Germantown Police Department officers. What you're about to see is a very brief PowerPoint presentation highlighting some of the facts and evidence in that case. Available for your review on our office website is the complete file. On the morning of May 17th, 2020, I was notified by the Germantown Police Department that 3 of their officers had been involved in a fatal shooting. According to procedure, I then contacted the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and asked them to take the lead into the investigation of the facts leading up to the death of the Germantown resident by the name of Brian Cooper. This is a summary of that investigation and my reasons for finding that no state criminal laws were violated by the officers. Shortly after 3 a.m. on Sunday, May 17, 2020, police received a 911 domestic violence call from a resident at 6932 Corsica Drive in Germantown. The woman said her husband had assaulted her and that he was armed with a gun. She was hiding under a table in the home. It's a photograph of the victim's cell phone and where she said she was hiding under in the kitchen. Victim's 911 call to police dispatch.
This is 911 emergency. Do you need police, fire, ambulance?
Yes, please. Use a gun.
Do you need police, fire, or ambulance?
Everything.
It's a photograph of the outside of the home. Caller's husband was identified as Brian Cooper, age 49. Responding officers knocked on the front door, received no response. They heard screams inside of the house and heard commotion coming from the back of the home. 5 officers went around to the backyard through a side gate and saw the homeowner, Brian Cooper, exiting through a back door with an AR-style rifle in his hand as well as a pistol in his front pocket. It's a photograph of the backyard. Officers then gave commands to Brian Cooper to drop the weapon. He refused to drop the weapon and was shot at by all 3 officers.
We have a male shot that shot, and I also believe I have a female complaining of broke ribs.
That's the Germantown Dispatch broadcasting for more units to the home. Paramedics pronounced Cooper dead at the scene at 3:55 a.m. His wife said her husband had kicked her, dragged her by the hair, and then began loading guns that he had removed from a safe in the home. He said he fired a shot in the backyard before the police arrived. She was treated at a hospital and released. The officers indicated that they identified themselves as police, ordered Cooper to drop his weapon, and that each time Cooper refused to do so. There's a quote from officer number 1. He turned and raised his weapon toward myself and fellow officers from low ready. I feared for our safety and that of the citizen and fired multiple rounds from my duty pistol, and I observed the male fall to the ground. Quote from officer 2. He turned and began to face me and bring the rifle up into firing position. I was in fear of my life and the lives of my fellow officers. I fired multiple rounds until the suspect was no longer a threat. And finally, a quote from Officer 3. He continued to walk through the backyard, then turned in an aggressive manner and began to raise his rifle from the low ready position. The subject was an imminent threat to myself and my fellow officers. I fired an unknown number of rounds until the threat was eliminated. It's a photograph of the rifle that was on the patio, rifle by the lawn chair, handgun and holster in the backyard, and an ammunition bag on the patio table. This was all found in Mr. Cooper's backyard near his body. Loaded handgun and extra clips found in Cooper's pocket. The in-car, this is a video from the in-car camera that recorded some of this. Shelby County Medical Examiner's report indicated that Mr. Cooper was struck by 12 gunshots, including 2 each in the chest, abdomen, and left arm, 1 each in the left hip, right hip, scrotum, and right ankle, graze wounds to the right thigh and the left forearm. He had amphetamine in his system and a blood alcohol content of 0.211. Legal analysis and conclusion of law. The question that has to be answered by this office in all officer-involved shooting cases is there evidence here of criminal conduct that would convince a jury to unanimously find beyond a reasonable doubt that these officers acted without lawful justification? That is the central question that I must answer in this case, and the answer after reviewing all of the facts and evidence is no. Under Tennessee law, a law enforcement officer may use deadly force if all other reasonable means of apprehension have been exhausted or are unavailable, and when the officer has probable cause to believe that the individual to be arrested poses a threat of serious bodily injury, either to the officer or to others, unless immediately apprehended. Officers here responded to a domestic disturbance call in which a woman said her husband had beaten her, that he was loading guns, and that he had fired a shot. When they confronted the husband, he was armed with an AR-style rifle, and he had a handgun in his pocket. The officers identified themselves as police. They were dressed in police uniform, and they gave several lawful commands to drop his weapon. He refused those. Each officer said the suspect began to raise his rifle as he turned toward the officers. They said they fired in self-defense and in defense of their fellow officers. They also knew there was an injured woman who was just inside the home. The officers each made split-second decisions in responding to the threat. The law does not require them to wait to be shot upon. The U.S. Supreme Court has said that the calculus of reasonableness must embody allowance for the fact that police officers are often forced to make split-second judgments in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving. Under these circumstances, I believe the 3 officers involved in this fatal shooting acted in a reasonable manner and that there was legal justification for their use of deadly force. My finding does not consider or address police policies, procedures, or training, nor does it apply to questions of civil liability. My only finding, my only job, is as it relates to criminal laws, and it is my finding that no criminal laws of the state of Tennessee were violated, and therefore no criminal charges will be or should be filed against these officers.